Steve Andreas, Six Blind Elephants, Volume 2, page 37. Our internal representations are seldom or never just idle thoughts. The brain doesn't work that way. What we represent internally tends to draw our attention, and it often elicits behavior as well. One of the main functions of internal representations is to guide us in satisfying our needs. When I think of eating too much, particularly if I do it often, I will be tempted to do exactly that, even when it is negated. Even though it is a negative outcome that I don't want, it is still an outcome, and my attention will go toward it. Many people come to therapists or other consultants with detailed descriptions of their problems, what they don't want, rather what they do want. Many people discipline their children by telling them what not to do, implanting vivid images in them that often elicit exactly the behaviors that are not wanted. Negative outcomes have enormous consequences for us all. Personally, socially, politically, and internationally. During the Cold War, our whole focus was on anti-communism and negative outcome. If a government was anti-communists, we considered them friends, and we showered them with money, weapons, and aid. It didn't matter how corrupt, cruel, oppressive, or undemocratic they might be, as long as they were anti-communist. If instead we had been pro-democracy or some other positive outcome, we would have been more likely to notice the corruption, cruelty, and oppression, and would have made different decisions about whom we allied ourselves with. Now we are deep into another negative international outcome, anti-terrorism. Again, we are supporting corrupt, cruel, and oppressive dictatorships, as long as they are anti-terrorist, because again we are focused on what we are against instead of what we are for. Negative criteria. Let's say I tell you about something only by saying what it is what it isn't. What I'm thinking about isn't green. It isn't very useful, nor can't it be eaten. What do you know about what I am thinking of? Virtually nothing. A category that is defined entirely by negative criteria is almost completely unknown and mysterious, because the only thing we know about it is what it isn't. We only know something about what is outside the category, not what is in it. When we describe ourselves using a negation, two very curious things happen. Although most people don't pay enough attention to their internal experience to realize it. To get a glimpse of this, imagine that one aspect of your self-concept is that you are not cruel. In order to understand those words, you first have to make an image of cruelty, and then separate from it, create an internal conflict and incongruence. If only one or two aspects of someone's self-concept are negations, it may not cause too much trouble. But if much of a person's self-concept is negated, it can cause great difficulty. Knowing who you are not is particularly troublesome because it is a preserved negation of the fundamental function of the self-concept, knowing who you are. If someone has no positive image of who they are, they will have only an empty feeling instead of the positive feeling they would have if they thought of themselves as kind. Knowing only who you are not results in not knowing who you are. Often, parents give lots of not messages that negate a child's self-concept, like, you are not smart, you are not pretty, etc. In response, often the child will identify with anything, because any sense of self is better than the horrible emptiness of negation. I have written extensively about the troublesome consequences of a negatively defined self-concept elsewhere. But one powerful aspect of NLP is to discover the internal experience that is elicited by the use of specific language. This enables us to use language in a very directed way in order to get the results that we want. Often the careful examination of a single word yields great dividends. And the word but is certainly one of them. Notice what happens in your internal experience when you take any two sentences, connect them with but, and then repeat the same two sentences in reverse order, again with but in the middle. For instance, compare, I like you, but there is one thing that bothers me. There is one thing that bothers me, but I like you. In both cases, the first scope diminishes in some way, while the second one becomes your principal focus of attention. Principle. The exact way that this happens varies from one person to another. When I hear the word but, the image of the meaning of the preceding word quickly slides to my left, disappearing out of my field of internal vision, and all that is left is the image of the meaning of the words that follow. Others might see the de-emphasized part as fuzzier, farther off or dimmer, and the emphasized part as clearer, closer, or brighter, etc. My old teacher, Fritz Perls, the originator of Gestalt therapy, used to call but a killer because it negates the preceding scope. You can use this kind of reversal whenever someone else uses but in a way that diminishes something that is important to you, and you want to emphasize it. A tired old joke illustrates this nicely. The mother says to the daughter, "I know he's ugly, but he's rich." And the daughter replies, "Mother, you're so right. I know he's rich, but he's ugly." Robert Dilts has pointed out that even though has a very similar effect, even though it often appears at the beginning of a sentence rather than in the middle. Notice your internal experience when you read the following two sentences. Even though I like you, there is one thing that bothers me. Even though there is one thing that bothers me, I like you. Knowing how but or even though diminishes part of a sentence, you can use it whenever you want to or have to. Mention something to someone, but you want it to diminish in importance or even disappear from the listener's awareness altogether. I know that this proposal would have significant costs, but it would reduce overhead and has the potential to double our sales. Even though this proposal would have significant costs, it would reduce overhead and has the potential to double our sales. Yes, but when people say, "Yes, but," they briefly acknowledge what someone else said, followed by something that negates it. When people are cautious or wary, they often tend to respond defensively and may oppose whatever you say and find problems with it. No matter how sensible your suggestion might be. Yes, I can see that, but there is a problem with it. Once someone is focused on a problem, it is easy to get tunnel vision and forget that the reason for noticing and thinking about problems is so that you can find a way to solve them and make a proposal work. Reversing the scopes can get the discussion back on track. Yes, I can see that there is a problem, but the proposal still has a lot of potential. Directs the listener's attention away from the problem and back toward the larger scope of the potential of the proposal as a whole. If you expect that a suggestion of yours is likely to be met with a "yes, but" response, you can make the first move and state the reverse of what you want the person to consider. Someone who "yes, buts" consistently will usually feel compelled to reverse it. In the example above, if the daughter, knowing that her mother often responds with "yes, but," says, "I don't know," pause. "He's ugly," pause. "But he is rich." "I don't know." "He's ugly, but he is rich." Mother is likely to respond, "Yes, he is rich, but he is ugly." If the mother doesn't reverse it, the daughter can always follow up with the reversal. And now her position is one of considering both sides of the matter, so she can't be accused of being stuck in one narrow point of view. If you want to make a proposal to your boss, who you know from long experience tends to find objections or respond negatively and reject an entire proposal, you can say, "You will probably think what I have to say is really crazy, but I'd like to offer you my proposal and see what you think." If the boss tends to respond in opposition, he will first have to disagree with the first part of the sentence. "You will probably think what I have to say is crazy," especially if you pause for a second before the "but." This will put him into a position of agreement with what you will say next. At this point, the boss has already had an opportunity to respond negatively, and then the "but" will tend to push this aside, so he is more likely to simply consider your proposal on its own merits. If you are pretty sure that someone is going to oppose what you say, giving them something else to object to allows them to approach the proposal itself more neutrally, or even positively. You can also explicitly invite the other person to find flaws in your proposal, which is something that you know they will probably do anyway. "You will probably find a lot of flaws in my proposal, but I'd like to offer it to you and have you point out the problems with it." If he is likely to respond in opposition to whatever you propose, he will also be likely to oppose your suggestion to find flaws in your proposal, and be at least a little less vigorous in doing that. By inviting him to find flaws, you have allied yourself with what he is prepared to do, so there is no opposition. He may still found objections to it, but likely without the defensive and critical attitude that otherwise would have been there. You also benefit from this, because you really do need to know about any problems with a proposal as soon as possible, so that you can redesign the proposal to solve or minimize them. Then, when he finds something to object to in the proposal and says, "Yes, but this X is a problem," you can reverse the sequence by saying, "Yes, I see that X could be a problem, but if we can find a way to deal with that, I think that the proposal as a whole could still be worth exploring in more detail." Again, you are allied with the boss, and you can work together toward a solution instead of being in opposition. When someone says, "Yes, X, but Y," you can also include their entire "Yes, X, but Y" response as the "yes" part of your "yes, but" reply. "Yes, what you just said is clearly important to consider, but I think that Z," whatever you want him/her to consider next, "is also worth thinking about." You can continue this kind of move as many times as you want to, in order to keep the discussion focused on the proposal. Since most people have great difficulty consciously tracking even one such move, this can be particularly effective in getting people to continue to pay attention to what you think is important and be willing to continue to consider and discuss it. These are all very useful ways to keep a discussion on track and not get caught up in the struggling with people's habitual defensive responses. Of course, all these moves, no matter how skillfully done, will not salvage a bad proposal. Using and instead of but. But splits our experience into two scopes, dividing our attention. In the sentence, I like you, but there is one thing that bothers me. The but divides and separates what comes before it from what comes after it. Try saying the same sentence, replacing but with and. I like you, and there is one thing that bothers me. Now, I'd like you to pause to have a more personal experience of this. Think of any inner conflict or incongruence that you experience and describe it with a simple sentence. You will usually find you separated the two parts of the conflict by using the word but. I'd like to get that job done, but I never seem to find the time. I often respond to others' feelings, but I seldom tell them about it. I think about what I'd like to do, but then I think of all the difficulties that would involve. Now, say your sentence to yourself, replacing but with and notice how different you feel saying that. And connects experiences together, allowing us to think of both parts of the sentence simultaneously. Okay, you like the proposal, and there is a problem with it. This keeps the two scopes, the suggestion and the problem, together in the person's awareness, and the problem can be considered together with the possible usefulness of the suggestion. Once I was working with a woman who said, "I'm kind, but sometimes I'm cruel." When I asked her to say the same sentence using and instead of but, she got tears and choking in her throat as these two aspects of her came together again and the separation was healed. A response to and that I have seen many times. Replacing but with and may seem like a ridiculously trivial change, but it is very easy to do, both in yourself and with others, and it can have a very powerful effect. Notice the deliberate use of but and in the previous sentence. Hidden negation. As we interact with other people, we are always responding to each other, and some of these messages will be liking and disliking aspects of what we and others do. As long as these messages are freely given and received with no demand to be different, and with no threat treat to our well-being, there is no problem. That is the same as liking some food or art better than others. The expression of our preferences is one way that we come to know each other. We may even ask for this kind of feedback information in order to know someone else better, and whatever they express, positive or negative, is accepted as useful information. As Fritz Perls used to say, contact is the appreciation of differences. This free give and take becomes transformed into something very different when someone has negated themselves in some way. This inner negation is often obscure, making it hard to realize what is going on. For instance, many people are concerned with wanting to feel that they deserve to have a good life, or they want to have self-worth. Others seek acceptance, a secure place in the world, or a right to be here. And all these goals sound positive. However, underlying these desires is thinking that they don't deserve to be happy, or feeling a lack of self-worth, that they are not accepted and don't have a place. These are all negations, and they can negate a relatively small scope of the self, such as intelligence, beauty, or confidence, or the much larger scope of the entire self. You are garbage. I wish I had never been born. When babies are born, they certainly aren't concerned with self-worth or being deserving, accepted, or finding a place in the world. Like the other animals, they have needs and desires, and they are very direct and empathic about announcing their presence and demanding satisfaction of their needs. They don't show the slightest doubt about their right to be here or deserving to have what they want. Then parents and other adults send them messages, first non-verbally and then verbally, about not being worthy or deserving, not being accepted, or not having a place, and the child learns to think that they do not belong. All these have the same structure: negation of the natural functioning of the child, a negation of part or all of who they are. These experiences continue as memories, which can be in any or all of the different sensory modalities, although this could be primarily an image or a perceptual feeling, for simplicity in discussing how it works. I will assume that an internal voice negates, "You don't deserve it." Then, when someone seeks to counter these negations with reassurance that they do belong, are deserving, are accepted, or do have a place, that is actually an attempt to negate what is already a negation. I am not undeserving, I am not unworthy, etc. This sets up incongruent categorical opposites within the person: not self-worth and self-worth, not deserving and deserving, etc. For simplicity, I will use the word reassurance to refer to any response that affirms something that someone has already negated. Reassurance feels good in the short term, but over the long term it doesn't solve the problem, and it actually increases the incongruence between the negation and the negation of this negation. This happens in several different ways. First, no matter how much reassurance someone gets, this doesn't regain what the small child began with, and what they really want, total and unquestioning being who they are, without a hint of either non-acceptance or acceptance. Second, reassurance from others is actually other worth rather than the self-worth that they want and seek. Since people differ in what they approve of, someone will need to do very different things in order to get reassurance from different people. That actually results in a strong involvement with others, which can extend to chameleon behavior, attempting to satisfy different people in different ways. And since some people are almost impossible to get approval from, this may sometimes result in extreme behaviors like acting out or a suicide attempt. A somewhat different way of getting reassurance from others that they are okay is to follow a particular set of social or religious teachings, so as to get reassurance from that group of people. This is more stable, since someone is always attempting to satisfy the same standards in order to get reassurance, rather than different people with different standards. However, it can lead to less contact with other people, since matching a set of abstract standards does not require attending to the responses of individual human beings. Third, when someone seeks reassurance from others, that is inevitably conditional rather than unconditional. It is conditional upon the behaviors that the person uses to ask for reassurance, and it is also conditional upon the willingness of the other person to provide it. If someone stops asking, or if other people stop responding, they will no longer receive reassurance. Fourth, reassurance from others is temporary because it doesn't eliminate the underlying negation. It only opposes it and offsets it. The internal voice continues to negate the person's being, lovability, acceptability, or place in the world, etc., and they will need to repeatedly seek acceptance to counteract it. Fifth, each external reassurance that I am worthy will tend to elicit an opposing "no you aren't" from that internal voice, escalating in the same way as an argument between two people, increasing the incongruence. If someone has an internal voice that negates who they are, and their lives seem to confirm this by being relatively unsuccessful in their job, relationships, etc. That is very unpleasant, but at least it is congruent. But if someone has the same internal negative voice, and they are successful in work, relationship, etc., the contrast between their internal voice and the outward success will be much greater. They may have a much better life, but at the most cost of greater incongruence. The more reassurance they get from others and worldly success, the larger the incongruence between the internal message about not being worthy and the external message about being worthy. Their internal voice will nullify any amount of external success. Seeking approval from others is like using makeup or any other artificial behavior to attract someone. The more you use, the more it contrasts with what it's covering up, and the more you know that the other person is responding to something that it is not real, rather than to who you really are. This greater incongruence causes instability and a loss of the external success may result in someone collapsing into midlife crisis, depression, or suicide. Sixth, there is an interesting parallel between the voice that says someone is not deserving and the assurance that says that they are. Both are based on the opinion of other people, not the person themselves. Whichever voice someone attends to, they become slaves to someone else's opinion, rather than attending to their own experience. If reassurance doesn't work to counter negative feelings of self-worth, what can someone do? The answer to this puzzle is to make the original negation clear and find a way to eliminate it, so that someone can return to their original state, in which they neither deserve nor not deserve. They just are. One way to do this is to listen carefully to those internal messages of negation and realize that those messages are about the adult who said them, not about the child who heard them. A change in scope. These messages came from adults with limitations, people who couldn't just say directly, "I am overwhelmed. I can't or won't provide what you need and want." Instead, they said in effect, "The only way I can deal with what you ask for is to tell you that you don't deserve it, that you won't ask for it, and I won't have to provide it." A slightly different way to elicit the same realization is to first collect and list all the internal rejection messages that the client has accumulated, including the emphasis, tempo, and tonality in which each statement was made. "You are no good," "You are stupid," etc. Then ask the client to visualize themselves as a newborn infant or small child, and ask them to say, each of these messages to this child, including the volume, emphasis, tempo, and tonality. These shift the person's perceptual position from being the receiver of these messages to being the sender. From this position, usually it quickly becomes obvious that this is totally inappropriate and ridiculous. Their response to the rejection messages changes from taking them seriously to hearing them as messages about the parent's limitations and inadequacies rather than their own.